The first industrial revolution saw a major switch from production by hand to production by machine. These changes were most pronounced in textiles, which is the production of cloth and woven fabric, the use of coal as a new source of energy, and the advent of steam engines. But after these transitions occurred, advancement continued and spilled into other industries where innovation started to find even greater opportunities for growth. The period from 1870 until the beginning of World War I in 1914 was a time of unprecedented new marvels. While the first industrial revolution saw inventions that were not particularly advanced, the second industrial revolution was propelled by scientific advancements. Bessemer refined a better process for making steel. There were discoveries of cheap artificial dyes, sulfuric acid used in steel making, and the conversion of ammonia into nitrates, which is used as a fertilizer. Alfred Nobel found a way to produce nitroglycerin on an industrial scale, which he turned into a paste called dynamite. Dynamite proved useful for a variety of projects, from civil engineering to quarrying of stone. Of course, dynamite was also a powerful weapon, and when Alfred Nobel read an erroneous obituary for himself, which called him a war profiteer, Nobel decided to bequeath his fortune to create the Nobel Peace Prize. There was also widespread adoption of electricity after the Jewish engineer Moritz van Jacobi invented a rotating electric motor with enough power to actually run machines. And Thomas Edison, taking the work of Nikola Tesla, developed a way to transmit electricity across long distances. Many of these inventions further combined into rapid advancements in transportation, railroads by land, and large coal-powered ships by sea. This wasn't just an economic change, but a change to the very structure of the family. Throughout most of history, the working class family was a unit of production and a cornerstone of a society's output. The early inventions of the Industrial Revolution, like the spinning jenny, didn't change this. The jenny was simply brought into the home. But eventually, the full mechanization of weaving led to work moving from the home into a larger factory. The workers in the family were now employed outside of the household, which disrupted the family structure. In England, this shift began in the mid-1820s, leading to a lot of social discontent. Wages were not much higher for these factory workers for a long while, until home production had essentially been completely liquidated and subsumed by factory production in the late 1830s. And then wages did start to rise. But in those early years, scholars agree this transition worked against labor. As the inventions of the Industrial Revolution began to revolutionize other sectors of the economy, the same story played out there too. People were no longer in business for themselves, producing their own wares and selling them to merchants. For better or worse, most people were now employees, working for someone else and being paid wages for their services. The increased scale of production that was made possible by industrialization radically transformed the structure of the economy. In 1840, it is estimated that the total US workforce probably numbered around 5.5 million people, but only about 3,000 of them were managers that supervised 50 or more employees. The large corporation, with its divisions and departments, just didn't exist and had never existed before this time. Every business was small, consisting of families or perhaps partnerships between 2 or 3 entrepreneurs and a handful of employees. But that started to change. In factories, people were hired to supervise the workers on the floor across different shifts. And eventually, the structure of firms had to grow beyond even that as their operations expanded beyond just production. Railroads provide a good case study for the development of the modern firm. When railroads became larger and longer, say 100 miles or more, broken into multiple sections, managers were required. That's when the railroad tycoons began to face the challenge of figuring out how to effectively and efficiently operate a small business with a large number of employees and equipment spread across large areas. After 1850, large American railroads started to operate through multiple units called divisions. Each division operated independently with a central office overseeing system-wide functions, such as track maintenance, machinery repair. Eventually, other industries outside of transportation and communication, which both had a geographic motivation for this structure, started to adopt it in order to expand their reach. Manufacturers established distribution centers, sales offices, purchasing offices, and other mechanisms to allow for increased production and sales. In the United States, large multi-unit enterprises like this followed what is known as the line and staff management structure. Line managers were directly responsible for the core functions of an enterprise, and in contrast, staff managers had responsibility for the materials required to run the company. Soon, management became a science all its own, and virtually every large firm has adopted this sort of management structure. This radical new structure of separate business divisions, each independently run by a manager, who was themselves under a manager of several divisions, who themselves worked under more managers or the chief executive, was able to capitalize on increased productivity and lowered costs. Prior to this structure, market mechanisms and Adam Smith's invisible hand coordinated the efforts of different business operations. Farmers would grow the cotton and sell it to people who would weave it into yarn, who would then sell the yarn to textile producers, who sold their work to merchants, who then brought it to customers. The price system coordinated these activities and guided resources and work to their most valued and profitable uses. But now huge chunks of that production process were under the umbrella of one company, and managers would coordinate that production process. This meant that there would be some losses in efficiency, as these managers would lose the power of the price system in guiding actions internally, resulting in occasional misallocations of resources. But those inefficiencies are outweighed by the gains in productivity and lower costs. A multi-unit firm made transactions between units routine and less costly. Information flowed better when production was linked to buying, distribution, and sales, and the central organization made more efficient use of facilities and personnel. It's unlikely management structures like this would have worked before the Industrial Revolution. Market activity needed to hit a critical mass first, where production could reach a large enough scale to make these gains from coordination outweigh the losses in efficiency. But that high volume of production also provided a more reliable cash flow that gave birth to a new form of employment, the salaried manager. From this came standard career paths. The typical career path with a railroad company would see a young man hired at age 18 as a shop laborer, be promoted to skilled mechanic at age 24, brakeman at 25, freight conductor at 27, and passenger conductor at age 57. Educated young men started in clerical or statistical work and moved up to station agents or bureaucrats at the divisional or central headquarters. The modern idea of a company and of a career were born in this time and have largely persisted to this day. They were only possible once economic growth had gotten started, but they have themselves been a source of continued growth as gains from better management and skills increased productivity gains and cost reductions even more.